Welcome back to the Spirit and Spirituality podcast. Today we will delve into the world unseen. We will start reading the book Life in the World Unseen, which is a channeled writing. The entity dictating the book from the other side of the veil is Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson, who was an English Catholic priest and writer. And the channel who received the communication was Anthony Borgia, who was just a boy of 12 or 13 when he met Monsignor. Monsignor passed away 4 years later after a short bout of pneumonia at the age of 42. It was 1914. Monsignor Robert Hugh Benson was the son of the Archbishop of Canterbury and studied at the Trinity College, Cambridge. Monsignor wrote many ghost and horror stories, as well as children's stories and historical fiction. His novel, Lord of the World, written in 1907, is regarded as one of the first dystopian novels. Monsignor's sincere regret and desire to correct the teachings contained in his previous influential Christian books, written when he was living on earth, prompted him to dictate the book from the other side. In it, he speaks about life in the spirit world, the Orthodox Church, religious belief, faith, spirit communication, mediumship, and what existence is really like for those who have crossed over into the next stages of life. So without further ado, let us begin. Life in the World Unseen. Part 1. Beyond this life. My earth life, who I am, really matters not. Who I was matters still less. We do not carry our earthly positions with us into the spirit world. My earthly importance I left behind me. My spiritual worth is what counts now. And that, my good friend, is far below what it should be and what it can be. This much as to who I am. As to who I was, I should like to give some details concerning my mental attitude prior to my passing here into the world of spirit. My earth life was not a hard one, in the sense that I never underwent physical privations, but it was certainly a life of hard mental work. In my early years, I was drawn towards the church because the mysticism of the church attracted my own mystical sense. The mysteries of religion, through their outward expression of lights and vestments and ceremonies, seemed to satisfy my spiritual appetite in a way that nothing else could. There was much, of course, that I did not understand, and since coming into spirit, I have found that those things do not matter. They were religious problems raised by the minds of men, and they have no significance whatever in the great scheme of life. But at the time, like so many others, I believed in a wholesale fashion, without a glimmering of understanding or very little. I taught and preached according to the orthodox textbooks, and so I established a reputation for myself. When I contemplated a future state of existence, I thought, and that vaguely, of what the church had taught me on the subject, which was infinitesimally small and most incorrect. I did not realize the closeness of the two worlds, ours and yours, although I had ample demonstration of it. What occult experiences I had were brought about, so I thought, by some extension of natural laws, and they were rather to be considered as incidental than of regular occurrence, given to the few rather than to the many. The fact that I was a priest did not preclude me from the visitations of what the church preferred to look upon as devils, although I never once, I must confess, saw anything remotely resembling what I could consider as such. I did not grasp the fact that I was what is called, on the earth plane, a sensitive, psychic, one gifted with the power of seeing, though in limited degree. This incursion of a psychic faculty into my priestly life I found to be considerably disturbing since it conflicted with my orthodoxy. I sought advice in the matter from my colleagues, but they knew less than I knew, and they could only think of praying for me that these devils might be removed from me. Their prayers availed me nothing. That was to be expected, as I now see. Had my experiences been upon a high spiritual plane, then is the chance that I should have been regarded in the light of a very holy man. But they were not so. They were just such experiences as occur to the ordinary earthly sensitive. As happening to a priest of the Holy Church, they were looked upon as temptations of the devil. As happenings to one of the laity, they would have been regarded as dealings with the devil or as some form of mental aberration. What my colleagues did not understand was that this power was a gift, a precious gift, as I understand now, and that it was personal to myself, as it is to all those who possess it. And to pray to have it removed is as senseless as to pray that one's ability to play the piano or paint a picture might be removed. It was not only senseless, it was unquestionably wrong, since such a gift of being able to see beyond the veil was given to be exercised for the good of mankind. I can at least rejoice that I never prayed for a release from those powers. Pray I did, but for more light on the matter. The great barrier to any further investigation of these faculties was the Church's attitude towards them, which was and is unrelenting, unequivocal, narrow, and ignorant. However long were any investigations, or in whatever direction, the Church's final judgment was always the same, and its pronouncements unvarying. Such things have their origin in the devil, and I was bound by the laws of the Church, administering its sacraments and delivering its teachings, while the spirit world was knocking upon the door of my very existence and trying to show me, for myself to see, what I had so often contemplated our future life. Many of my experiences of psychic happenings I incorporated into my books, giving the narratives such a twist as would impart to them an orthodox religious flavor. The truth was there, but the meaning and purpose were distorted. In a larger work, I felt that I had to uphold the Church against the assaults of those who believed in the spiritual survival of bodily death, and that it was possible for the spirit world to communicate with the earth world. And in that larger work, I ascribed to the devil, against my better judgment, what I really knew to be nothing other than the workings of natural laws, beyond and entirely independent of any orthodox religion, and certainly of no evil origin. To have followed my own inclinations would have entailed a complete upheaval in my life, a renunciation of orthodoxy, and most probably a great material sacrifice, since I had established a second reputation as a writer. What I had already written would then have become worthless in the eyes of my readers, as I should have been regarded as a heretic or a madman. The greatest opportunity of my earthly life I thus let pass. How great was that opportunity, and how great was my loss and regret! I knew when I had passed into this world, whose inhabitants I had already seen so many times and on so many different occasions. The truth was within my grasp, and I let it fall. I adhered to the Church. Its teachings had obtained too great a hold upon me. I saw thousands believing as I did, and I took courage from that, as I could not think that they could all be wrong. I tried to separate my religious life from my psychic experiences and to treat them as having no connection with one another. It was difficult, but I managed to steer a course that gave me the least mental disturbance. And so I continued to the end, when at last I stood upon the threshold of the world of which I had already had a glimpse, of what befell me when I ceased to be an inhabitant of the earth and passed into the great spirit world. I hope now to give you some details. Passing to the spirit life. The actual process of dissolution is not necessarily a painful one. I had, during my earth life, witnessed many souls passing over the border into spirit. I had had the chance of observing with the physical eyes the struggles that take place as the spirit seeks to free itself forever from the flesh. With my psychic vision, I had also seen the spirit leave, but nowhere was I able to find out, that is, from orthodox sources, what exactly takes place at the moment of separation. Nor was I able to gather any information upon the sensations experienced by the passing soul. The writers of religious textbooks tell us nothing of such things, for one very simple reason: they do not know. The physical body many times appeared to be suffering acutely, either from actual pain or through labored or restricted breathing. To this extent, such passing had all the appearance of being extremely painful. Was this really so? Was a question I had often asked myself. Whatever was the true answer, I could never really believe that the actual physical process of dying was a painful one, notwithstanding that it appeared so. The answer to my question I knew I would have one day, and I always hoped that at least my passing would not be violent, whatever else it might be. My hopes were fulfilled. My end was not violent, but it was labored, as were so many that I had witnessed. I had a presentiment that my days on earth were drawing to a close, only a short while before my passing. There was a heaviness of mind, something akin to drowsiness, as I lay in my bed. Many times I had a feeling of floating away and of gently returning. Doubtless during such periods, those who were concerned with my physical welfare were under the impression that, if I had not actually passed, I was sinking rapidly. During such lucid intervals that I had, I endured no feelings of physical discomfort. I could see and hear what was going on around me, and I could sense the mental distress that my condition was occasioning. And yet, I had the sensation of the most extraordinary exhilaration of the mind. I knew for certain that my time had come to pass on, and I was full of eagerness to be gone. I had no fear, no misgivings, no doubts, no regrets, so far at thus leaving the earth world. My regrets were to come later, but of these I shall speak in due course. All that I wanted was to be away. I suddenly felt a great urge to rise up. I had no physical feeling whatsoever, and very much in the same way that physical feeling is absent during a dream, but I was mentally alert, however much my body seemed to contradict such a condition. Immediately, I had this distinct prompting to rise. I found that I was actually doing so. I then discovered that those around my bed did not seem to perceive what I was doing. since they made no effort to come to my assistance, nor did they try in any way to hinder me. Turning, I then beheld what had taken place. I saw my physical body lying lifeless upon its bed, but here I was, the real I, alive and well. For a minute or two, I remained gazing, and the thought of what to do next entered my head, but help was close at hand. I could still see the room quite clearly around me, but there was a certain mistiness about it, as though it were filled with smoke very evenly distributed. I looked down at myself, wondering what I was wearing in the way of clothes, for I had obviously risen from a bed of sickness and was therefore in no condition to move very far from my surroundings. I was extremely surprised to find that I had on my usual attire, such as I wore when moving freely and in good health about my own house. My surprise was only momentary, since I thought to myself, what other clothes should I expect to be wearing? Surely not some sort of diaphanous robe. Such costume is usually associated with the conventional idea of an angel, and I had no need to assure myself that I was not that. Such knowledge of the spirit world as I had been able to glean from my own experiences instantly came to my aid. I knew at once of the alteration that had taken place in my condition. I knew, in other words, that I had died. I knew too that I was alive and that I had shaken off my last illness sufficiently to be able to stand upright and look about me. At no time was I in any mental distress, but I was full of wonder at what was to happen next, for here I was, in full possession of all my faculties, and, indeed, feeling physically as I had never felt before. Although this has taken some time in telling, in order that I might give you as much detail as possible, the whole process must have taken but a few minutes of earth time. As soon as I had this brief space in which to look about me and to appreciate my new estate, I found myself joined by a former colleague, a priest, who had passed to this life some years before. We greeted each other warmly, and I noticed that he was attired like myself. Again, this in no way seemed strange to me, because had he been dressed in any other way, I should have felt that something was wrong somewhere, as I had only known him in clerical attire. He expressed his great pleasure at seeing me again, and for my part, I foresaw the gathering up of the many threads that had been broken by his death. For the first moment or so, I allowed him to do all the talking. I had yet to accustom myself to the newness of things. For you must remember that I had just relinquished a bed of final sickness, and that in casting off the physical body, I had also cast off the sickness with it, and the new sensation of comfort and freedom from bodily ills was one so glorious, and the realization of it took a little while to comprehend fully. My old friend seemed to know at once the extent of my knowledge, that I was aware that I had passed on, and that all was well. And here let me say that all idea of a judgment seat or a day of judgment was entirely swept from my mind in the actual procedure of transition. It was all too normal and natural to suggest the frightful ordeal that orthodox religion teaches that we must go through after death. The very conception of judgment and hell and heaven seemed utterly impossible. They were wholly fantastic, And now that I found myself alive and well, clothed in my right mind, and in fact, clothed in my own familiar habiliments, and standing in the presence of an old friend who was shaking me cordially by the hand and giving me greeting, a good wishes, and showing all the outward, and in this case, genuine manifestations of being pleased to see me as I was pleased to see him. He himself was in the best of spirits as he stood there giving me such a welcome as, upon the earth plane, two old friends accord each other after long separation. That in itself was sufficient to show that all thoughts of being marched off to a judgment were entirely preposterous. We both were too jolly, too happy, too carefree, and too natural, and I myself was waiting with excitement for all manner of pleasant revelations to this new world, and I knew that there could be none better than my old friend to give them to me. He told me to prepare myself for immeasurable number of pleasant surprises, and that he had been sent to meet me on my arrival. As he already knew the limits of my knowledge, so his task was that much easier. As soon as I managed to find my tongue, after our first breaking the silence, I noticed that we spoke just as we had always done upon the earth. That is, we simply used our vocal cords and spoke quite as a matter of course. It required no thinking about, and indeed I did not need to think about it. I merely noted that it was so. My friend then proposed that as we had no further need or call to stay in the surroundings of my passing, we might move away, and that he would take me to a very nice place that had been made ready for me. He made this reference to a place, but he hastened to explain that in reality I was going to my own house, where I should find myself immediately at home. Not knowing as yet how one proceeded, or in other words, how I was to get there, I placed myself entirely in his hands, and that, he told me, was precisely what he was there for. I could not resist the impulse to turn and take a last look at the room of my transition. It still presented its misty appearance. Those who were formerly standing around the bed had now withdrawn, and I was able to approach the bed and gaze at myself. I was not the least impressed by what I saw, but the last remnant of my physical self seemed to be placid enough. My friend then suggested that we should go now, and we accordingly moved away. As we departed, the room gradually became more misty until it faded farther from my vision and finally disappeared. So far, I had had the use, as usual, of my legs, as in ordinary walking. But in view of my last illness and the fact that, consequent upon it, I should need some period of rest before I exerted myself too much, my friend said that it would be better if we did not use the customary means of locomotion, our legs. He then told me to take hold of his arm firmly and to have no fear whatever. I could, if I wished, close my eyes. It would, he said, perhaps be better if I did so. I took his arm and left the rest to him as he told me to do. I at once experienced a sensation of floating such as one has in physical dreams, though this was very real and quite unattended by any doubts of personal security. The motion seemed to become more rapid as time went on, and I still kept my eyes firmly closed. It is strange with what determination one can do such things here. On the earth plane, if similar circumstances were possible, how many of us would have closed our eyes in complete confidence? Here there was no shadow of doubt that all was well, that there was nothing to fear, that nothing untoward could possibly take place, and that, moreover, My friend had complete control of the situation. After a short while, our progress seemed to slacken somewhat, and I could feel that there was something very solid under my feet. I was told to open my eyes. I did so. What I saw was my old home that I had lived in on the earth plane. My old home, but with a difference. It was improved in a way that I had not been able to do to its earthly counterpart. The house itself was rejuvenated, as it seemed to me from a first glance, rather than restored, but it was the gardens round it that attracted my attention more fully. They appeared to be quite extensive, and they were in a state of the most perfect order and arrangement. By this, I do not mean the regular orderliness that one is accustomed to see in public gardens on the earth plane, but that they were beautifully kept and tended. There were no wild growths or masses of tangled foliage and weeds, but the most glorious profusion of beautiful flowers, so arranged as to show themselves to absolute perfection. Of the flowers themselves, when I was able to examine them more closely, I must say that I never saw either their like or their counterpart upon the earth, of many that were there in full bloom. Numbers were to be found, of course, of the old familiar blossoms, but by far the greater number seemed to be something entirely new to my rather small knowledge of flowers. It was not merely the flowers themselves and their unbelievable range of superb colorings that caught my attention, but the vital atmosphere of eternal life that they threw out, as it were, in every direction. And as one approached any particular group of flowers or even a single bloom, there seemed to pour out great streams of energizing power which uplifted the soul spiritually and gave it strength, while the heavenly perfumes they exhaled were such as no soul clothed in its mantle of flesh has ever experienced. All these flowers were living and breathing, and they were, so my friend informed me, incorruptible. There was another astonishing feature I noticed when I drew near to them, and that was the sound of music that enveloped them, making such soft harmonies as corresponded exactly and perfectly with the gorgeous colors of the flowers themselves. I am not, I'm afraid, sufficiently learned musically to be able to give you a sound technical explanation of this beautiful phenomenon, but I shall hope to bring to you one with the knowledge of the subject who will be able to go into this more fully. Suffice it for the moment then to say that these musical sounds were in precise consonance with all that I had so far seen, which was very little, and that everywhere there was perfect harmony. Already I was conscious of the revitalizing effect of this heavenly garden to such an extent that I was anxious to see more of it. And so, in company with my old friend, upon whom I was here relying for information and guidance, I walked the garden paths, trod upon the exquisite grass, whose resilience and softness were almost comparable to walking on air, and tried to make myself realize that all this superlative beauty was part of my own home. There were many splendid trees to be seen, none of which was malformed, such as one is accustomed to see on earth. Yet there was no suggestion of strict uniformity of pattern. It was simply that each tree was growing under perfect conditions, free from the storms of wind that bend and twist the young branches, and free from the inroads of insect life and many other causes of misshapenness of earthly trees. As with the flowers, so with the trees. They live forever, incorruptible, clothed always in their full array of leaves of every shade of green, and forever pouring out life to all those who approached near them. I had observed that they did not appear to be what we should commonly call shade beneath the trees, and yet there did not appear to be any glaring sun. It seemed to be that there was a radiance of light that penetrated into every corner, and yet there was no hint of flatness. My friend told me that all light proceeded directly from the giver of all light, and that this light was divine life itself, and that it bathed and illuminated the whole of the spirit world where lived those who had eyes spiritually to see. I noticed too that a comfortable warmth pervaded every inch of space, a warmth perfectly even and as perfectly sustained. They had a stillness, yet there were gentle perfume-laden breezes, truest zephyrs, that in no way altered the delightful balminess of the temperature. And here let me say to those who do not care much for perfumes of any sort, do not be disappointed when you read these words and feel that it could never be heaven to you if there was something there you do not like. Wait, I say, until you witness these things, and I know that then you will feel very differently about them. I have gone into all these things in a rather detailed fashion because I'm sure there are so many people who have wondered about them. I was struck by the fact that there were no signs of walls or hedges or fences. Indeed, nothing so far as I could see to mark where my garden began or ended. I was told that such things as boundaries were not needed because each person knew instinctively, but beyond doubt, just where his own garden ended. There was therefore no encroaching upon another's grounds, although they were open to anyone who wished to traverse them or linger within them. I was wholeheartedly welcome to go wherever I wished, without fear of intruding upon another's privacy. I was told I should find that it was the rule here, and that I would have no different feelings with respect to others walking in my own garden. I exactly described my sentiments at the moment, for I wished then and there that all who cared would come into the garden and its beauties. I had no notions whatever of ownership personally, although I knew that it was my own to have and to hold. And that is precisely the attitude of all here, ownership and partnership at one and the same time. Seeing the beautiful state of preservation and care in which all the garden was kept, I inquired of my friend as to the genius who looked after it so assiduously and with such splendid results. Before answering my question, he suggested that as I had but so very recently arrived in the spirit land, he considered it advisable I should rest, or that at least I should not overdo my sightseeing. He proposed, therefore, that we should find a pleasant spot. He used the words in a comparative sense because all was more pleasant everywhere. That we should seat ourselves and then would expound one or two of the many problems that had presented themselves to me in the brief time since I had passed to spirit. Accordingly, we walked along until we found such a pleasant place beneath the branches of a magnificent tree, whence we overlooked a great tract of the countryside whose rich verdure undulated before us and stretched far away into the distance. The whole prospect was bathed in glorious celestial sunshine, and I could perceive many houses of varying descriptions, picturesquely situated, like my own, among trees and gardens. We threw ourselves down upon the soft turf, and I stretched myself out luxuriously, feeling as though I were lying upon a bed of the finest lawn. My friend asked me if I was tired. I had no ordinary sensation of earthly fatigue, but yet I felt somewhat the necessity for a bodily relaxation. He told me that my last illness was the cause of such a desire, and that if I wished, I could pass into a state of complete sleep. At the moment, however, I did not feel the absolute need for that, and I told him that for the present I would much prefer to hear him talk. And so he began. Whatsoever a man soweth, he said, that shall he reap. Those few words describe exactly the great eternal process by which all that you see actually here before you is brought about. All the trees, the flowers, the woods, the houses that are also happy homes of happy people, everything is the visible result of whatsoever a man soweth. This land wherein you and I are now living is the land of the great harvest, the seeds of which were planted upon the earth plane. All who live here have won for themselves the precise abode they have passed to by their deeds upon the earth. I was already beginning to perceive many things, the principal one of which, and that which touched me the most closely, being the total wrong attitude adopted by religion in relation to the world of spirit. The very fact that I was lying there where I was constituted a complete refutation of so much that I taught and upheld during my priestly life upon earth. I could see volumes of orthodox teachings, creeds, and doctrines melting away because they are of no account, because they are not true, and because they have no application whatever to the eternal world of spirit and to the great Creator and upholder of it. I could see clearly now what I had seen but hazily before, that orthodoxy is man made, but that the universe is God given. My friend went on to tell me that I should find living within the homes that we could see from where we were lying all sorts of conditions of people, people whose religious views, when they were on earth, were equally varied. But one of the great facts of spirit life is that souls are exactly the same the instant after passing into spirit life as they were the instant before. Deathbed repentances are of no avail, since the majority of them are but cowardice, born of fear of what is about to happen, a fear of the theologically built eternal hell that is such a useful weapon in the ecclesiastical armory, and one that perhaps has caused more suffering in its time than many other erroneous doctrines. Creeds, therefore, do not form any part of the world of spirit, but because people take with them all their characteristics into the spirit world, the fervid adherents to any particular religious body will continue to practice their religion in the spirit world until such time as their minds become spiritually enlightened. We have here, so my friend informed me, I have since seen them for myself, whole communities still exercising their old earthly religion. The bigotry and prejudices are all there, religiously speaking. They do no harm except to themselves, since such matters are confined to themselves. There is no such thing as making converts here. Such being the case, then, I suppose that our own religion was fully represented here. Indeed, it was. The same ceremonies, the same ritual, the same old beliefs, all are being carried on with the same misplaced zeal in churches erected for the purpose. The members of these communities know that they have passed on, and they think that part of their heavenly reward is to continue with their man-made forms of worship. So they will continue until such time as a spiritual awakening takes place, pressure is never brought to bear upon these souls. Their mental resurrection must come from within themselves. When it does come, they will taste for the first time the real meaning of freedom. My friend promised that if I wished, we could visit some of these religious bodies later. But he suggested that there was plenty of time. It would be better if, first of all, I became quite accustomed to the new life. He had, so far, left unanswered my question as to who the kindly soul who tended my garden so well was. But he read my unspoken thought and reverted to the matter himself. Both the house and the garden, he told me, were the harvest I had reaped for myself during my earth life. Having earned the right to possess them, I had built them with the aid of generous souls who spend their life in the spirit world performing such deeds of kindness and service to others. Not only was it their work, but it was their pleasure at the same time. Frequently, this work is undertaken and carried out by those who, on earth, were experts in such things and who also had a love for it. Here, they can continue with their occupation under conditions that only the world of spirit can supply. Such tasks bring their own spiritual rewards, although the thought of reward is never in the minds of those who perform them. The desire of being of service to others is always uppermost. The man who helped to bring this beautiful garden into being was a lover of gardens upon the earth plane. And, as I could see for myself, he was also an expert. But once the garden was created, there was not the incessant toil that is necessary for its upkeep, as with large gardens upon earth. It is the constant decay, the stresses of storm and wind, and the several other causes that demand the labor on earth. Here, there is no decay, and all that grows does so under the same conditions as we exist. I was told that the garden would need practically no attention, as we usually understand the term, and that our friend, the gardener, would still keep it under his care if I so wished it. Far from merely wishing it, I expressed the hope that he certainly would do so. I voiced my deep gratitude for his wonderful work, and I hoped that I might be able to meet him and convey to him my sincere appreciation and thanks. My friend explained that that was quite a simple matter, and that the reason why I had not already met him was the fact of my very recent arrival, and that he would not intrude until I made myself quite at home. My mind again turned to my occupation while on earth, the conducting of daily service and all the other duties of a minister of the church. Since such an occupation, as far as I was concerned, was now needless, I was puzzled to know what the immediate future had in store for me. I was again reminded that there was plenty of time in which to ponder the subject, and my friend suggested that I should rest myself and then accompany him upon some tours of inspection. There was so much to see, and so much that I should find more than astonishing. There were also numbers of friends who were waiting to meet me again after our long separation. He curbed my eagerness to begin by saying that I must rest first. And for which purpose, what better place than my own home? I followed his advice, therefore, and we made our way towards the house. That's it for today. We're done with part 1, and I'll come back with part 2 later. Till then, stay happy, stay healthy. Bye for now.